Hi everyone, Zach here, and welcome to Lesson 40 in this series on developing a survival game. In this video, we'll set up our sound cue for our footsteps and set up our attenuation and reverb. This series has been brought to you by my Patreon sponsors. With that said, open up your project and let's make a start. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the editor, and welcome back to your island as well. In this video, we'll create our sound cue for our island. And what we're going to want to do before we get started is have our asset file open with all of our sound cues in it. Now, to get this all set up, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our survival game main folder and create a new folder that I'm going to call audio. And in our audio folder, I'm going to select everything in here. Actually, I lied. I'm going to do one more thing in the audio folder. I'm glad I took a look at that. I'm going to put footsteps in first. I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to then bring my assets over, and I'm going to select everything but environmental, and then drag them into here. So I'm going to rename some of the folders in a moment. And I'm just going to go Control S, save everything, so it stores this all in here. It's all our sound waves. Go ahead and let it store. And while it's, I thought it was going to take a moment for that to happen. I'm going to just rename these folders to get rid of the extra text I put in. And do the same for our mud path. Ooh, well, I'll just do mud. There we go. So once we've done that, we have three things we need to create before we, well, three things we have to create. Two before we do our sound cue. And so I'm going to start with our reverb. So I'm going to go to Sound, Reverb Effect, and I'm just going to name this RE for Reverb Effect, Footstep. And let's pop this open. In newer versions of the engine, it's going to look a little bit different. Don't worry, everything that we're doing in here is the same. That said, I'm actually speaking about the next thing we're going to do, because we're not going to do anything in here. We're just going to leave this as is. If you want to mess with the reverb later on, go for it. But everything else in here is actually the same. This is perfectly fine for what we're doing. Now, the next thing we're going to create is our sound attenuation. And this is the part that's going to look different in newer engines. So I'm going to name it SA for sound attenuation, footstep. Now, the sound attenuation, as I said, is going to look different in newer engines. That's fine. Everything I am going to adjust is available in newer versions. Everything that's available in the newer versions are things that I wouldn't adjust anyway, at least not for this. So I'm going to start here at attenuation distance. We're going to get rid of linear and go to natural sound. We will leave it at minus 60 decibels for this. We will use a sphere. So a way to think about this is, I'm just going to open up the character so we can think about our sound cue. Let me just go over to character, first person. Don't follow along with what I'm doing. Just watch for a moment because I'm literally doing nothing. I'm just showing you something. I'm going to search for my sphere collision. And what we are saying is, what's the default size on this? 3600. We are saying that the sound attenuation will go out to about 3600 units. So that's as far as the sound will go. That's how far that sound travels. It's a very large space, actually. Maybe not really. It's 360 meters. 36 meters? I can't do basic math right now. Pretend I said the right number. And then we have a fall-off distance, which I believe the default is 400. We will be changing that, by the way. So let's add another sphere. So, that was the wrong sort of sphere. And I'm just going to also attach it to the character there. Actually, I don't think it's attached to the character. I think it's attached to the collision component. Sphere, collision sphere. And this one was 400. So that's 4 meters. That's 36 meters. I'm really sad the spheres gave that away to me on the basic math mistake I made earlier. So this is the distance at which the sound is the loudest. And it starts fading, 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 fading until it naturally sort of fades out at that distance. So this is really what our attenuation looks like if you were to think about it. And the reason why I'm using spheres is, well, we're set to sphere. All right, I am going to delete these spheres. If I say sphere again in this video, I'm going to cry a little bit probably. All right, with that done, I am going to shift this though. I want these to be related to each other more closely. And it's going to seem really stupid, but I'm going to remove 40 Unreal units. So it's 360 to 3600 so that I'm creating it's a factor of 10. All right, I am going to leave the attenuation specialization on with panning. I am going to change the non-specialized attenuation to be the same as the 3D stereo here of 200. I'm going to turn on my air absorption, but I'm going to lower this by 1,000 units. So it's 2,000, and I'm going to lower this one by 2,000 units, so it's 4,000. Everything else will remain the same. So basically this is how much of the sound is absorbed by, well, the air, or attenuated through the air. And then we'll do our occlusion. So we want the sound to be blocked if there's a large enough thing to actually block the sound or to muffle it a bit. And we'll use a visibility channel. Everything else here will remain the same. I'm going to save this, close it out, and then we're on to the third thing that we need to create, which is the actual sound cue itself. So I'm going to right click, go to sound cue, and this will be SC. I'll give you a guess what that stands for. Footstep. At least I'm not doing SQ, right? All right, and so we have our output here. And we're going to switch between each of our physical materials to get different sounds based on what we're walking on. And we're going to want the sounds to vary a bit. And so we're going to do two things to vary the sound. We're going to do one of them here and one of them in our animation blueprint. So we have our output. What is playing out? Actually, before we go further forward, just make sure your sound attenuation is set to footstep here. And I believe everything else is already correct. We want that on master. We'll talk about what that is down the road as we get towards the user menus. All right. So we want to be able to adjust the sound. There are two nodes we're going to use to do that. We're going to work backwards from the we're going to work from the output backwards. So we're going to do continuous modulator. So this is something that will continuously adjust our pitch and our volume. And we are going to use both of these for now. And we're going to give these parameters names, and they're really, you can name them whatever you want, but this should be really easy in this case. What are we doing? We're taking a step. What are we modulating? Our pitch. Everything else will remain the same. For our volume modifier, we're going to do the same thing. What are we doing? We're taking a step and we're modifying our volume. In this case, I am going to put the min output to 0.2 just so that we always get some sound. And again, for the min output, it's always going to be 0.2 as well. And then we're going to use a modulation device here, or node. So we'll do modulator. And this is the second node we'll use to modulate our sound. And we will leave everything except for this volume min as is. We'll set this to 0.6. And then we are going to have a switch node. Now, I mentioned in the last video that the order in which you did things needs to be consistent. That is the same here. I am going to do things in alphabetical order, so I know I'm being consistent, but this one is probably the most important part about being consistent. If you get this one wrong, it doesn't match anything else you're doing, the sounds aren't going to play correctly. You're going to get the wrong sound to the wrong spot. So we're going to do switch. And before we do anything else with the switch node, we're going to give this a name. Because right now it's named none. And I'm going to name this, just so I know what we're doing, surface type. We are switching based upon the surface that we are walking on. Now I want a total of 7 pins in here, and that includes the parameter unset and 0. So in other words, 1 to 5. All right. Now, I'm really sad this took me a live stream to work out. Instead of going into each folder and dragging them in one at a time, we can stay in this window, go to Windows, go to Content Browser. I'm going to bring it over to the other window and go into Footsteps. And we're going to do this by holding the Shift key down and selecting all of them and dragging them in here. Doesn't really matter what order they come in, so long as they're all in here. We should have 6 for each of these. We are going to do a random, and then we need a total of 6 pins. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Boom, 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 boom. All right, really important. I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to make this really easy for me. I know that I'm not going to use parameter on set and 0. 0, by the way, is default. Now, I'm going to show you in a minute how I know that. I am going to start with 1. So I'm going to do 0, 1, and then I'm going to say what this is. So I know that the first surface type is dirt. Now, how do I know that the first type, not 0, but 1 is dirt, when everything else in coding starts with 0? Well, because 0 is default, as I said. If I go to project settings, and once it opens, and I go to physics, 1 is dirt. Default is actually 0. So I want to start with 1. And I'm going to repeat this process of going into my sound effects, selecting them, and bringing them in here. There we go. And duplicating that note so I don't have to hit the pin thing over and over again. So what I want you to do, and I'm going to pause the recording once I finish speaking so you can go ahead and do it, is go and do these for the other 4, actually 3 at this point, effects that we have. So go ahead and pause this video where you're at and come back once you have finished setting up your sound cues. Alright, when you're done, you should have 0, 1 dirt, 2 grass, 3 mud, 4 rock, 5 sand, if you're following along with what I have. And it should look roughly something like this. I mean, you can organize this however you want, but as long as all the sound cues for the right types are grouped together and they're in the same order as you're going to use elsewhere. Really, at the end of the day, the order here is the most important. It isn't so much the order in our settings menu. It's really the order here that matters. But that takes us through everything we need to do. We set up our sound cue, our reverb, and our sound attenuation. In the next video, we'll actually be implementing those sound cues. We'll play those sounds. All right. And that said, I hope you've enjoyed working on setting up your sound cues. If you have, make sure to hit that like button down below. And the series and this video have been brought to you by Patreon sponsors like 1Volt10, Connor, Rian, Hanas, Quadmanson, and Galwa. If you want to be here when we actually are able to play our sounds and hear what we're walking on, make sure to hit that subscribe and notify icon. All of that said, I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.